Hello, ladies and gentlemen. It is once again that time of the week. What time of the week is it? Well, it is that time of the week where we come onto your airwaves and we tell you what is really going on. We dig underneath the dirt and the propaganda. Come down to you from the deep state and from the mainstream media and the information industrial complex. We call out the establishment on its BS and talk about politics on the local, national, international level, and are joined week in, week out by a panel of Hoodrat strategists, local activists, and radicals. As always, the following thoughts, views, and opinions are not necessarily those of 89.1 FM WIDR Kalamazoo or Western Michigan University. So I wanted to start by getting a local spin on something that has been a deservedly hot topic as of recently, and we're probably going to be spending a good chunk of the show talking about this topic today. And I'm of course referring to the state of our American immigration system and the absolute atrocity it has become under the Trump administration. Now, important caveats and certain things I've said have kind of stirred the pot on the internet, but as with most things related to Donald Trump, his administration's policies did not come out of a vacuum, and they come from a long and sad history of very callous immigration policy. And again, we will be going into that a little bit deeper later in the show, but I wanted to start by kind of laser focusing here on how this administration and the policies of ICE have really been making an impact here in the Kalamazoo area. And this particular article really hit me in the gut because it talks about the neighborhood that I grew up in, the Edison. So I'm just going to go ahead and start reading from it. I think a lot of the article speaks for itself. But I'll go ahead and give you, here's the title: Increased Deportation Enforcement Leaves Many Edison Families Living in Fear. This is by Teresa Cody O'Neill. And just for a little bit of context, for those who don't know, the Edison neighborhood demographically has the largest Hispanic population in the city. And anybody working on the ground in active circles knows that this is a community that, particularly since Trump came into office, has really been living in fear. A lot of people don't know. ICE's jurisdiction is always 100 miles away from any border. Now, because the state of Michigan is surrounded by lakes, that means effectively our entire state is an ICE enforcement zone. This has led to many issues, many problems. We've got several ICE detention facilities in the area. There's actually one right over in Calhoun County, right near downtown Battle Creek. And I do believe there are actually some protesters organized by Justice for Our Neighbors out there earlier today speaking to that. But let's talk a little bit about how this policy has actually been affecting our neighbors, our own people who live down the street, down in the Edison, people that I may have actually grown up around or grown up with. And again, this takes more of the form of a story than political analysis, but I think it's very important to kind of talk about and read on air. So 3 weeks before Christmas, Edison resident Edgar Garza was picked up by Homeland Security Immigration Control Enforcement and detained in the Calhoun County Correctional Center. Garza has been in the United States since 1995 and in Kalamazoo since 1999, working in raising a family in Edison. In December, he found himself housed with other undocumented immigrants, some of whom did not have families or jobs for an undetermined length of time. For the Garza family, life had become increasingly uncomfortable since the 2016 presidential election and ensuing tightening of immigration policies. Both Garza and his wife are undocumented and had been hearing more and more about increased enforcement. There isn't any insurance. Your parents are going to be coming home to you when you get back from school, said Edgar about the effects on his children. There is that fear that you could lose your family from one day to another. When Edgar was arrested, he became one of a growing number of detainments by ICE in southwest Michigan, according to Anna Hill, staff attorney with Michigan Immigrant Rights Center. From 2016 and 2017, ICE arrests increased 52% in Michigan and Ohio, slightly higher than the national average. And, just kind of sideline here, if you have a perception that because, for whatever reason, Michigan is so far north, maybe we're not affected by ICE in the same way that a border state with Mexico would be, please think again. Their broad jurisdiction gives them a lot of leverage and leeway in this part of the country that they don't have in a lot of others, and they have been exercising this. Several months ago, we talked about a raid in New Era that affected a dairy farmer out there, and basically several of his employees were kidnapped by ICE, much to the chagrin of the company and the surrounding neighborhood and community. World Socialist website did a very good article about this. They went in and interviewed a lot of the residents and co-workers of the individuals who were snatched. But yeah, these raids, they're going on here. They may not be as brazen or as violent as we've seen in a lot of these viral videos that are going around about how ICE has been harassing people. But, there's stuff on video that goes on around here that they don't show you. Very early on in the administration, we got reports of ICE standing on the corner in places like Town and Country, over off of Portage Road and Reed Street, essentially harassing people and asking them about their citizenship. So, yeah, I guess please, if you're under the impression that maybe ICE doesn't have as much of a foothold or presence here in Michigan as elsewhere in the country, please do think again. They are here, and they are snatching our folks. She goes on to say, the fear around increased immigration enforcement is related to an actual increase in enforcement. Some of these arrests happen directly from ICE actions. For instance, ICE officers are going out and taking someone right off the street or in their homes. And this has also happened. There have been reports of people in their apartment, you get a knock on the door, all of a sudden, they are gone. They're snatched up. People can also end up in ICE custody with local law enforcement. And I'll go on and talk a little bit, go on more. It talks a little bit more about the demographics of the neighborhood. Current aggressive immigration policies are creating a climate of unease and distrust, an atmosphere that affects not only undocumented immigrants, but also the entire Latinx community and anyone who knows families who are affected. This is particularly true in Edison, where the Hispanic population is almost 20%. And as it goes on to really talk about this situation in particular, talking more about Edgar. At their Edison home in December, Edgar's wife Beatriz was facing one of her worst fears. She had to tell their children, her 8-year-old daughter and 16-year-old son, that their father had been detained. She also had to find ways to raise money for the family, to pay for the phone calls for Edgar, and to possibly raise bail, should the opportunity arise to post it. For Beatriz, that meant rallying for support at El Sol Elementary School, her daughter's school, which, by the way, is right in the Vine neighborhood. A lot of you are probably familiar with it. And goes on to talk to, actually a colleague of mine, but that's neither here nor there. But they talk to her about, she is the community, Allison Parsons, she's a community outreach coordinator for the parent-teacher organization at El Sol. And that's a Kalamazoo Spanish language immersion school, for those who don't know. She said she was distraught about the overnight sea change in immigration policy following the election. She says the day following the election, she saw children crying in the hallways of El Sol when she took her son to school. One child thought that they were going to build a wall down the middle of Vine Street, which meant they could no longer play with their friends, Parsons says. El Sol is made up of 50% Spanish-speaking students who may Many who live in Edison, says Parson, noting that the current immigration climate affects not only children of undocumented immigrants, but also their peers. Kids see color differently. All they know is that this is a kid I've played with since I was in kindergarten. What do you mean you're going to take them away? What do you mean they can't be here? It goes on to talk about how the community kind of took action. When the PTO found out about Garza's family situation, they launched into action. The vulnerability of saying we need help puts you at such risk, says Parsons of the Garza family. And then to watch Beatriz come in, day out with a straight face and smile at people, acknowledge them while keeping strong for her daughter, that was very moving. Fortunately, after 17 days, Edgar was approved to begin the legal process to apply for residency. The school community raised enough money to provide support for the family while Edgar was detained, along with $2,500 to pay his bail. Edgar, however, was one of the lucky ones. Many bail amounts for ICE detainees are set at $8,000 and $9,000, which can place a considerable hardship on relatives and community members who want to help. And I would just add a bit of commentary to that. Most of the people that ICE picks up, they, by virtue of them being in America, they are working class people. Now, there are exceptions to that. There was a very prominent and kind of upper middle class doctor from Poland who was snatched up by ICE here in Kalamazoo several months ago. He was a doctor at Bronson Hospital, which kind of goes to show ICE is really being very indiscriminate in their arrests. That's something we've talked about several times on the show before, how there's no longer, at least, and we've also been very critical of Obama's immigration policy. At the time, he deported more immigrants than any president before him, but there was more of an emphasis on devoting resources to people who have been convicted of violent crimes. Now it's like you have any kind of blemish on your criminal record or not, and you are at risk for deportation. Goes on to talk a little bit more about how the community mobilized. This is from Adrian Vasquez. He's the executive director of El Concilio. He works closely with immigrant families, including those who are facing detainment or possible deportation, by connecting them with organizations such as MERC, Justice for Our Neighbors, a local immigration safe haven, and Legal Services Group, and the Immigration Assistance Program. We're not experts on the law, but we're experts on relationships and connections with other organizations, he says. Helping with immigration issues has become a growing part of his job in recent months. When Vasquez first took his post 2 years ago, he worked with 5 to 10 immigration issues a month. Since 2017, he says that number has risen to 5 to 10 a week. ICE comes around the city more often staying for 1 to 3 days at a time and making several arrests, Vasquez says. For a few years, ICE was doing the right job, only looking for people with arrest warrants. Now they're questioning everyone and taking people that don't have criminal records. We want a safe community, but breaking families apart doesn't create a safe community. For the past year, our community members live in fear, and they don't see a clear future for them and their children. Vasquez says that people might question... Hold on just a sec. Actually, I'm going to go let one of the co-hosts in, put a pin in that thought. I will be right back. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm back. So let me just finish up some important points from this article here. And this is an important thing to mention. Vasquez says people might question why more immigrants don't seek legal status rather than live in fear. For many undocumented immigrants, there is no process for them to obtain legal status. For others, some processes are available, but they're limited to the number of visas available for the year. Those who are given green cards are finding that it takes 1 year to process an application to United States citizenship and immigration services, though in the past it has taken 6 months. And I want to talk a little bit right near the end of the article. Just them kind of talking about their experience. For Edgar, he has a heightened cautiousness when he's out and about in the neighborhood. When you see a police officer, you get the sense of panic, not because you have done something bad, because you're afraid they will pull you over because you might not have a driver's license, said Edgar. Beatrice and Edgar have plans to start a fund for other immigrant families experiencing similar situations to help pay for bail, phone calls, and other expenses. The way I felt, other families are feeling the same, said Beatrice, who is grateful for the support she received. Thanks to God, there were organizations that would help me, but there are people who don't have family, who don't have other people who can help them, so I want to help them. In general, anybody who's in a situation, anybody who wants to help or make a difference, anything will help. Talking or driving them somewhere, food, money, any actions are welcome. When this is happening to you, you just want a hand to help you move forward. So, again, I wanted to start the show by reading that article really for two main reasons. One is, all of this has been painted in like a very, very broad national brush. We can't believe what the Trump administration is doing. They're putting these kids in cages. They're excuse me, talking about Jeff Sessions and his zero tolerance policies at the border. But, just to be clear, ICE is not some alien threat. As I mentioned at the top of the program, Michigan is technically a border state. They have jurisdiction over our entire landmass because of that, and they are active in this area. It would, I'd say, behoove everyone in our community, please keep a watchful eye out. There are groups like COSECHA who are doing the work in our community to help protect our undocumented neighbors. You can get involved that way. But another reason I wanted to read this article is because, and I don't know about you, Lawrence, but listening to the news last week or so, I've been oscillating between righteous indignation and just I don't want to get out of bed. We're just too terrible. Just nah.
To be honest, a lot of Americans should be upset. 2/3 of our country are within 2/3 of our country are within 100 miles of the border, and that's where ICE operates. Mm-hmm. So the fact that Michigan, that they're operating in Michigan, wasn't even a question. The question was, where are they hitting? And when you read that article, when you read that passage where he said, when you go outside, you get a sinking feeling when you see the police, and I'm like, yeah, that's a normal day in America for most minorities in this country. Mm-hmm. And the other thing that's irritating me in the national news, national news is correct to point out that a lot of the language that the Trump administration is using are exactly the same type of languages that they were using during World War II, during that neo-Nazis were using. But that it doesn't just go there. If you look at the language that our country used to justify the slave trade when they were breaking up families, how Andrew Jackson, the language that he used when he made our Native American population and the whole Trail of Tears thing, of the type of language that they were using to justify Japanese internment camps. Our country has a history of doing these things, of doing this type of behavior and justifying it. And the thing that really pissed me off the other day was Corey Lewandowski on Fox News. I forgot, Democracy Now! Played a clip of it. There was a Democratic Democratic representative. I forgot what his position was, but he was recanting a story about a 10-year-old girl that got snatched from her parents, but the 10-year-old girl has Down syndrome. The thing is, while he was speaking, Corey Lewandowski said "womp womp," and he was just like "womp womp," whatever. And the dude was like, "Did you just say womp womp about a kid that has Down syndrome? About a 10-year-old kid who has Down syndrome getting snatched from their parents? Have you lost your damn mind?"
Oh man!
And it's the carelessness and recklessness of this country that does not surprise. Like, it doesn't surprise me, because when I look at our history and how we have dehumanized and we subjugate and dehumanize by calling people insects and animals, and that they're hide your kids, hide your wife because they're coming for you type of propaganda, and a portion of our country falls for that, eats that up, now it's being normalized. It's being normalized again because we have a president that does it, and we have an administration that enforces it. And Democrats, and that's the other thing. We don't have a proper resistance from the left to bash people over the heads that they have baby prisons now. Literally baby prisons in 3 different cities in Texas. One of them is in the city that my sister's in, Houston, Texas. Shout out to my sister Leah. But yeah, I'm furious. I'm angry because I have Latino family members in my family. I wish an ICE agent would touch one of my cousins. Yeah. I wish they would. like, oh my God, oh my God, it would, like, Flint, Michigan would be set on fire if one of these ICE agents was to touch my family. Like, and that's the other thing. The other thing that pisses me off is that, well, there's one thing that pisses me off and one thing that gives me hope. The one thing that pisses me off is that this is coming from the party of family values. This is coming from a party that love, and they've been using religion to justify their barbarism, which, as a Christian, A, Jesus wouldn't support this. B, the fact that you're using Bible verses that were also used to justify slavery and that was against interracial marriage, that was against gay marriage. You're using the same Bible verses to justify your barbarism only sickens me. And which brings me to my next point, which brings me joy. Jeff Sessions is a Methodist. He's a Methodist Christian. Mm-hmm. There's been over 600 churches that are Methodist churches that have wrote a formal complaint saying that Jeff Sessions needs to stop this policy, or he needs to no longer be affiliated with the Methodist Church because as they cited, his barbarism and cruelty to children. And I was like, because my dad's a Methodist and I've been going to the Methodist church all my life. Like, I go to Methodist and Baptist churches all my life. I'm like, yes. Yes.
Good,
yes.
Good going, the Methodist. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I was like, absolutely. That's what you're supposed. That's how you resist. Stop this policy that's hurting these children, or you no longer need to be affiliated with us. You ain't coming to our church.
No,
you ain't coming to our church.
Oh, yeah. You can start your own church where you add an extra commandment on it, like thou shalt not have empathy for anybody who looks different. I don't know.
For other human. No, and this is the other thing that pisses me off. You have besides the fact that these people are basically doing the same things that like we're using neo-Nazis, and we'll keep referring to what they're doing to these children as the same taxes that they were doing to neo-Nazis. But I would love for them to say this is the same things that they were doing to justify slavery. I would love for them because it literally is. I would love for these people to make these connections to the darkest part of Americans' history, so that we remember this is not what we want to do. We don't need to repeat this. We don't need to repeat this. This is not what we need to do. Because you justify and you normalize the cruelty to these children, then the next step is, I promise you, because as The Intercept and other places have reported, over 30-something children have been taken. Over 3,500 children have been taken. One of those kids are not going to survive. Some of those children will end up dying. And when that ends up happening and they try to normalize these children dying, you're going to see, you will start to see a sea change. Because most people, I hope, and I see it, that most people have some type of human empathy. There's that 28% of some supporters who are still with him even after all this garbage, that still see him as the authoritarian chief. And they want him to keep on doing this.
Yeah, and I mean, part of that psychology, because like I've been kind of following a few like right wing threads on this just to see how they're trying to justify it, and so much of it is around like a lot of these straw man arguments about like, well, how come you care so much about immigrants and not the homeless? Or another one I see like just getting back on like the old arguments about how like, they come up here and they take our jobs and they take our money and they send it back to Mexico. And it's part of this indoctrination that, I mean, if you can boil down what Fox News and like all those Koch brothers think tanks try to infect the American imagination with, it's this idea that you should blame all of your problems on people with no money and no power. It is like that is probably the most frustrating thing. Like when you're talking to these people, because it is easier for them to blame, like a Mexican immigrant, because one, they have no interaction with that culture or those people, usually in their own neighborhoods, and it's more likely that they've probably interacted at least sparsely with Hispanic folks rather than a billionaire. So it's like they're latching on to something that can help them make sense of the world around them, and it's made them turn off their own humanity to entire sections of people. And granted, a lot of them, it's a little bit more nuanced than that, and they're not completely devoid of conscience, but there's enough people in America today who follow that mindset that we are in 28%? A very dangerous time. Yeah, 28%.
This is the other part of this. The other part of this, which is not being talked about, this is a strategy that Donald Trump has done before. We've seen Donald Trump hold hostages before. Now we actually have faces to those hostages. Yeah. Mm-hmm. The first time he held hostages for his border wall and his horrible agenda, which was the tax cuts and the adding to the defense spending and these policies, especially his border wall. We saw him do this with DACA. We saw him do this with CHIP. He held those programs as hostages to say, okay, well, the Democrats and Congress and the Senate, y'all need to do exactly what I tell you to do, or this program's taking 2 shots to the head, or these. But now he's holding these kids are in private prisons that donated to Donald Trump, so they're getting money for having these bodies in the prisons. On top of the fact that some of these private prisons are using these kids to do labor, and they're putting them in. This is what private prisons do. Now Trump's saying, hey, I said that Mexico was going to pay for this wall, but we're going to have the American people pay for this wall. So Democrats and the Congress, Senate, and y'all need to do what I say, and you need to give me money for this border wall, or these kids are going to get it. And this is the problem that's also very upsetting. You have 2 bills that's in the Senate and that's in the House. One bill saying, hey, let's not break up the families, but we'll send the entire family to jail. That's the Congress bill.
Yeah.
That's the Congress bill. And the Senate bill is, well, we're going to rip up the families, but hey, the people who are we're going to separate the families, but hey, if they stay in the federal prison and they spend 14 years doing indentured servitude, then they can get out. Then they can get out, and we'll deport them. We'll deport them after they do manual labor to pay for them being locked up.
Man.
That's the other bill that's in the Senate. So you have one bill that says, hey, we're not going to break up the families, but we are still going to send them to private prisons. The other one is, well, we're going to break up their families, but hey, after they work for us for 7 to 14 years, then we can deport them afterwards, after they paid off their indentured servitude. So we have indentured servitude or litigation for these families while they're staying in private prisons. Now let me be fair, because we're supposed to be fair on this show, and I'm gonna talk about the Vox article that talks about President Obama's legacy and comparing it to Trump's policy right now. There's a reason why President Obama was called deporter in chief. He deported more people than the previous presidents before him. That is fact. A lot of his policies were harsh, just as harsh, or maybe a little bit worse. Those are facts. But what Trump is doing with not only separating families, but keeping them in tent cities, keeping when they're being transported to different cities, even the airplane stewardesses can't even serve them food. Those type of things, inhumane things, are the steps that lead to what you saw in Nazi Germany. Yeah. Lead to the things that led to the Japanese internment camps. It's that kind of normalization of barbarism that turns our country back to the pages of where we were years ago.
Oh man, institutionalized, deliberate cruelty. And you know what? Yeah. Let's take a quick break. I do want to come back to this topic. There's still a lot to unpack from it.
There's a couple other things that I also want to talk about that has not gotten news coverage. Mm-hmm. The amount of bombs that our president is dropping overseas, the fact that they hit a Doctors Without Borders facility. That needs to get coverage. It is not getting enough coverage. We can talk about some happy news. There is happy news. Mm-hmm. E3 just happened, so we can talk a little bit about that. But yeah, let's take a break.
All right, y'all listening to the Hoodrat Strategist radio program only on 89.1 WIDR Kalamazoo, your only source for political revolution.
Be apparent, but hunger is a rather prominent issue amongst the student body of Western. The Invisible Need Project is a multifaceted initiative that's aimed to help struggling students. Every 2 weeks, generous people donate their food to the pantry located in the Fawn Student Service buildings or other drop-off locations. All you need to do is grab a reusable bag and grab whatever food you need to help sustain yourself. If anyone's unsure when their next meal will be, or if you have a little extra food you'd be willing to donate, the food pantry is your place. If you're looking to help donate, become a volunteer, or just learn more, call 269-387-4742 or email dosa-inp@wmich.edu for details.
Are you trying to get your local business's name out to the WMU and Greater Kalamazoo communities? why not do so while supporting Radio Evolution through underwriting and donations? For more information, please visit widerfm.org.
We can dig that when yeah.
Hey everybody, we are back. This is the Hoodrat Strategist radio program, only on 89.1 WIDR Kalamazoo, your only source for political revolution.
Okay, one quick thing.
Yeah.
All right, one quick distraction.
Yeah.
Did you see the Creed 2 trailer?
No, I didn't. I to make a Creed 2, I didn't even know.
Again, there are things that are happy that we could distract ourselves with, but let's get back to some real stuff.
All right, so I wanted to follow up with like a point you made about so here's the interesting thing, and I posted about this on Facebook, and one of the frustrating things I've seen in the last few days is and granted, one of the problems, or at least one of the silver linings, I was like a lot of people in the activist community are thinking about with the Trump administration, it would really expose like the seedy underbelly of what our government does. And you have people like Barack Obama and Laura Bush and the entire Bush family really, the Clintons coming out and decrying this policy, and I think it's important to make a distinction, because yes, like by degree, what the Trump administration is doing is far more brutal and cruel.
Oh yeah, it's far more brutal and cruel.
It didn't come from nowhere, and it's agonizing to see the hypocrisy of these individuals coming out and decrying this now, when they set the stage for all this stuff. They, especially like George W. Bush, created ICE in the wake of 9/11, and don't be confused by a lot of the centrist folks out there. I'm thinking of you, Kamala,
oh my God,
talking about the necessity of ICE and how it's necessary for our safety.
Oh my God.
I'm older than ICE. ICE is not old enough to drink. All right. We did without ICE. We could do it without them again. There are other agencies that can handle law enforcement without basically being an immigration Gestapo. And even though they've basically taken on that role substantially during Trump's time,
they are the brown shirts.
Yeah, they are the brown shirts.
They are the brown shirts, man.
And they've been doing these raids for years. There's this one of the pictures that's been circulating of these kids in the cages actually was from 2014. And what a lot of people got to remember is, I think it probably sums it up best is Democracy Now! They had a reporter go down to one of these immigration facilities and talking about the difference between Obama and Trump, and kind of big picture, like they were still kind of separating the families to an extent, but they allowed for communication. They put them in more comfortable conditions. Granted, like the cages thing is a very real thing, but there was more of a concerted effort to like mitigate the trauma. Now, that's not to say that it's still right. No, it's wrong. It's like if you're talking about torture, it's the difference of speaking about like saying like torture is a moral wrong, and then saying like on the other hand, it's like, I'm okay with like sleep deprivation, psychological torture, but waterboarding, that's where I draw the line. It's like, no, you just need to be against torture. You need to be against craven immigration policy.
Yeah, it's like you can get punched in the face, or you can get punched in the face with brass knuckles. Yeah. How about I don't get punched in the face?
Here's
the thing. I mean, oh my God, I can't believe I'm about to give this guy credit. Can we have immigration policy that the great Saint Ronald Reagan did, when he gave immunity to a million undocumented immigrants? Like, it's funny how one of the worst Republican presidents that we had in our modern time gave immunity to to immigrants. Immunity to over 1 million immigrants in our country. And we can't even get back to that. Like that's too far to the left now. Like oh my God, it literally blows my mind. And the whole thing with Kamala Harris, like when I talk about we don't have an adequate resistance, that's what I'm talking about. Because under her, because when she was the Attorney General of California, the arrest record for low crime drug offenses and what ICE was doing under her watch increased. Yeah. And this was supposed to be a progressive, liberal Attorney General. It infuriates me when people who know that this is wrong encourage the thing that's wrong. So it's just like with Anastasia Cortez in her debate with Joe Crowley, and Joe Crowley was saying that we need to have ICE. Let us remind you again what you said before. We didn't have ICE until 9/11, and it was draconian and it was fascist by design. President Obama made it worse, and our president Pumpkin Face decided to say throw some D's on that. So the thing that makes it irritating, because when it comes back to, because it goes back to the policy. Why is this? Why are things amping up? Why are things getting much more hostile? He's using these kids as hostages for his border wall, and also for some of the other policies that he's doing. Because that he wants the American taxpayers to pay for, that he said Mexico was going to pay for, or in saying that this is a Democratic policy when it's his policy, because there is no actual law saying that you need to separate families from the border. Mm-hmm. Jeff Sessions has kids. Donald Trump has kids. Sarah Huckabee Sanders has kids. If their children was to be snatched away from them, they would be infuriated. Melania Trump's an immigrant. So and even Melania said that she doesn't support this. Mm-hmm. That's insane. When the first wife says, "Yo, and slow down,"
she had to put like the necessary caveat in there, but still.
But the fact that the first lady said, "Slow down, son, you're killing them," like that speaks volumes. That speaks absolute volumes. And the other part that's infuriating. I know we're going to move to another topic. Why is it that the evangelical Christians that help put Trump in office, how is it that they are not the ones who are calling for Trump's head now? Because Jesus was a brown-skinned Jew who parents couldn't find a room for him, and they had to go in a barn to give birth to him. What? Like Jesus, and like if you want to be technical about it, Jesus was an immigrant, son. Let's keep it real, son. So like if we're gonna be honest, my Christian brothers and sisters, if this doesn't break your back, if this doesn't break if this is not the straw that breaks the camel's back with Trump, I don't know what's wrong with you, because that goes against every Christian value. Let me remind you that Jesus said, "What you do for the least among you, you do in the service of me." Who's the least among you in this situation? People who cross the border, who have no money, no political power, no actual economic stability, who doesn't know how to speak the language, and they're running from their lives because their country is under attack, or their threat of violence because of the foreign policy that we were doing in their countries.
Yeah, and we're getting a phone call in. I would say it called back maybe in about 12 minutes or so. We're gonna go on break around 6. But we would like to talk to you and hear from you. I just want to kind of put a fine point on a lot of what we've been talking about with Trump and immigration. And, you know, one of the things that's really scary to me about Trump and, you know, the comparisons to, you know, fascism and Nazi Germany are extremely valid, probably more so than they've ever been. But, you know, the scariest thing about Trump to me, though, is that it's very performative. Like he says these authoritarian things a lot of times. I'm quite sure he's doing them deliberately to incense the left and create outrage. Like he's like a heel style wrestler, so he'll slip in a line like separate but equal when he's talking about creating a space force, Republican Space Rangers. But, you know, what's crazy about this is, like, you think of somebody like Adolf Hitler, and, you know, the man was methodical, and he had this whole ideology behind, like, what he was doing. Like, it was, like, he had these sincerely held beliefs, and that's why he did all of the horrific genocidal atrocities that him and his government committed. With Trump, though, it's... the only thing he worships is money, is capitalism. So it's like, oh, you know what? I'll recreate concentration camps. And it's not because, you know, and yeah, he's racist, but I think it's not so much because, like, he hates Mexicans or he hates immigrants as much as, like, I will get what I want. And if you don't give me what I want, okay, you call me a fascist? Well, fine. I'll just go ahead and be one. It's, you know, it is everything coming home to roost. And, you know, when I talk about, you know, how important it's to understand, how important it is to understand everything that has led us up to this is the nightmare scenario. This is what happens when all of the tools of brutality of the American government get handed to, like, I'm reminded of that kid from the Twilight Zone episode who could, like, kill you with his thoughts. Like, that's the kind of person that we have running the United States right now as president. And frankly, like, yeah, he's worse than his predecessors, but his predecessors built the toolkit that he's playing around with. So,
yeah. I mean, like, this is what happens when one, you don't respect the rule of law. Like he said, why do we need judges? He wants to keep them in prison, and then when he feels like it, throw them out. That's why do you think he praises people like Kim Jong-un and Vladimir Putin? He praises dictators. Yes. It's what he wants to be.
What's that one song from the Jungle Book? Like, I want to be like you.
Yeah, that's what he wants to be. So, and it's not a surprise, folks. The first thing that he said when he was running for president was, when Mexico sends their people, they're not sending their best. They're bringing drugs, they're crime, they're rapists, and some are good people. Like, he's been saying that he was going to do this horrible stuff for years. And what do you know? Years later, he's doing it. You know, when something walks like a duck and quacks like a duck, it's probably a duck.
All right, so I think, like, unless there's someone else you'd like to hop on next, I was very interested in this story about our state's education system. I don't know if you read about that.
I haven't got to it. What's about?
Oh, boy. Oh, this is a fun one. So, this is from, and I'll read the highlights. This is from Bridge, Michigan. It's a news website for the state. And headline is, History Gets a Conservative Twist in Michigan Social Studies Standards. And let me... I'll just read some bits and pieces, and I think you'll get the context of this right away. References to gay rights, Roe versus Wade, climate change.
Oh, yeah, I heard about that.
Yeah, core democratic values have been stripped from Michigan's new proposed social studies standards, and the historical role of the NAACP has been downplayed through the influence of Republican State Senator Patrick Colbeck and a cadre of conservatives who helped rewrite the standards for public schools in kindergarten through 12th grade. And I'll just read you some of the highlight or lowlights, I guess I should say.
Yeah, those are lowlights.
So, just important to note, new standards are now being reviewed as part of a public comment period that ends June 30th. And the State Board of Education expected to receive feedback on public comments in August. So this isn't set in stone, but a lot of the stuff that's being proposed here is just downright like creepy and Orwellian. Also, Colbeck is running for candidate for governor, and is also said some like major dog whistly stuff about Abdul El Said. So it doesn't really surprise me. So they wanted to remove the word democratic because of its implied partisan leanings.
Wow.
Colbeck, he says that our education is obviously an advocate for certain partisan viewpoints. But he said he's very willing to listen to others. And here's some other notable changes. References to the Ku Klux Klan are decreased from 2 to a single reference in 8th grade, along with a mention in a list of optional examples history school teachers can consider when teaching about social issues between 1890 and 1930. So I'll teach them about the KKK or not, 5 existing references to the NAACP have been cut, with a lone reference remaining in the section on the 1920s on its legal strategy to attack segregation. 2 references to gay and lesbians in the current standards and sections dealing with the fight for rights for minority groups have been deleted. Both references to the current standards in Roe v. Wade are removed. A high school standard about the expansion of civil rights and liberties for minority groups cut references to individual groups, including immigrants, people with disabilities, and gays and lesbians. The new proposal includes teaching, and I crap you not, this is probably the most stunning part in the article. Oh my, and we were talking about right-wing propaganda before. Oh man. Quote, how the expansion of rights for some groups can be viewed as an infringement of rights and freedoms of others.
If Roseanne Barr and James, what was it, Mr. Peterson? What's his name? The famous
Jordan Peterson.
Yeah. If Jordan Peterson and Roseanne Barr was the Write Your History class, this is probably what it would sound like.
Yeah.
Jesus Christ.
Because, black people want to use a water fountain, or trans people wanting a unisex bathroom. That's oppression.
I mean, women getting the right to vote. That's oppressing males. Asian Americans, Asian immigrants not wanting to be put in internment camps. That's a problem. That's a problem right there.
Yeah.
Jesus Christ.
So some light part of this. So there are the group that is going to eventually be deciding on this. It's going to be a committee of representatives from a pretty diverse group. There's going to be the Arab American National Museum in Dearborn, a representative from the Saginaw Chippewa Indian Tribe, and the Southwest Michigan Black Heritage Society. So there are going to be some sensible voices in the room.
Oh, thank God.
Yeah. However, there's also they mentioned five of these people on the committee, and oh man, they are something. So Colbeck himself, he sponsored a bill to allow the Secretary of State to offer a Choose Life license plate. More recently, he gained attention for saying Muslims have a jihad plot to infiltrate the American government, and yes, that involved Abdul El Said. So.
I mean, he doesn't like Keith Ellison, man. He doesn't like. You know what I'm saying? Like, here's the thing. Look. There are people on the alt-right that want to influence American policy and devolve us back to the 1940s and 50s. If they could, they would take us all the way back to 1910.
Yeah.
Where in my belief, and I strongly believe this, if they could, they would take us back to slavery, man. Like, seriously.
Oh, I mean,
because of the fact that you have people like these group of people that want to whitewash history and either dismiss or disengage from facts in history. That's the thing that they want. They want to, in every way, shape, or form, digress from the progress that we've been having in this country. How in the world are you saying that you're a free thinker, or that you're for you cry as a snowflake saying that the liberals are censoring you, or that you that people don't want to engage in debate with you, when you don't want to mention Roe v. Wade, you don't want to mention probably Brown versus Board of Education, you don't even want to mention the Ku Klux Klan and acknowledge the history of our country. Yeah. We cannot move forward if we do not know where we come from. And it's these kind of people that don't want to acknowledge where we come from. And why do you think that we're in the mess that we are in now when it comes to these undocumented immigrants? Well, and these children.
Yeah. I mean, it's just a furthering, like, I think, anybody who's like particularly radical or political or is even just studied a lot about our history understands, like, there's a lot that's kept out of the history books when you're growing up, and that is to foster a very particular kind of worldview where you believe in the myth of American exceptionalism and you believe that our atrocities are in the past. Well, like, what's an even better way to erase that than to just pretend that past doesn't exist or not mention it,
or you completely misrepresent it. I remember growing up in school and being told that Nat Turner was a brutal, heartless savage that was a runaway slave, killing slave owners, trying to have a slave revolt so that his brothers and sisters wouldn't have to live in a system that was dominated by the benefit of slavery. I mean, we just saw earlier today, which was some good news. Charlottesville. I think is it Charlottesville, North Carolina, or is it South Carolina? I forgot which one it is. North Carolina. No, South?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's South.
Okay. Charlottesville the city and the council and the government of Charlottesville has just apologized, made a national apology about their role in America's slave trade. 40% of the slaves that came to this country landed and was distributed out of Charlottesville, and they had to apologize for the history that they had to apologize for their role, for their city's role, and what they have done. Now, yes, this is the same Charlottesville where a young white woman was killed by a neo-Nazi. So we're not that far off from the history of the past, but we have made progress. It's these type of numbnuts that do not want to acknowledge that.
No, exactly. And just to kind of tie it in a little bit, I mean, we talk about history, this is just a continuation of they've solidified a foothold of conservative and neoliberal thinking at colleges and universities. Trump administration last year made further attempts to try to kind of parcel off college to, again, only be affordable for the rich and the white and the opulent. This is an extension of that into our public school system, and it's just so disgusting and so honestly, like, just unnerving that we could be getting this kind of propaganda taught in our own public schools. And
I mean, the way they acknowledge, they don't even talk about Black Wall Street and the government, our government shutting down a city, destroying a city that money was circulated through the community because the minorities that was living in that community could not go to other places to do their shopping or to be able to have getting their living requirements. So they create a city and they called it Black Wall Street because the money was circulating throughout the community. Our government and our American citizens destroyed that city. When you talk about the Black Panthers, we forget that social programs like free breakfast in schools, free clinics, after school reading programs,
those were started by the Panthers.
Those were started by a socialist group that that cared about their community so much that they had to do a lot of the things that the government was not willing to do because of the laws of the time.
Mm-hmm. And you know, I mean, it's interesting. Were you taught about it? Like, were you taught at all about the Black Panthers in school? Because I know, like, for myself, it was like they were a really radical group, and they hated white people, and they wanted like the black people to take over, and like, you know, that was the subtext of reading. And like, if you actually know the history of the Panthers, like, they were not anti-white. They worked hand in hand with a lot of like socialist leftist groups in the late 60s when they were active.
The Puerto Rican National Movement, the Poor White People Movement. They also was working with Martin Luther King with the Poor People Campaign and the Civil Rights Campaign. The White Panthers, which is a part of Michigan's history, which is never talked about, they were inspired by a speech from Huey P. Newton, and they started a socialist revolutionary group here in Michigan, and their group was started in Ann Arbor and then it moved to Detroit, and that's another political group that was doing that was for socialist programs like free breakfast, free clinics. They were doing those things, but you don't hear that. That's not the story that you hear.
No, not
and
at all.
This is the other thing that but that goes back to this miseducation. When we talk about the miseducation of our children, and this is the thing that I actually credit Germany for. Germany and the EU always talk about the history of what the Nazis did. It is a crime to Holocaust deniers are lambasted. They teach about the history of how Germany could have been manipulated to do such heinous acts. They teach it so they don't repeat it. If you don't want to repeat history, then you don't learn from history. I mean, if you want to repeat history, you don't learn from your mistakes. These people have not learned from they don't think that the fascist programs or the racist programs that we had before was a problem. They think they were a feature. They think that these things were okay. You're infringing on my freedom to discriminate against you.
Yeah, exactly. It goes back to the whole thing with the cake, you know?
Oh my God, that's the whole other story. Okay. I was like, it is 6 o'clock. It's about 6 o'clock. Yeah, it's 6:04. We should take a break, and then I do want to talk about what's going on with some of our foreign policy because it's insane.
Oh yeah, let's do that. Y'all are listening to the Hoodrat Strategist radio program only on 89.1 WIDR Kalamazoo, your only source for political revolution.
Hi, this is Fred Snyder of the B-52s and the Superions, who were formerly the Del Morons. And every time I'm in Kalamazoo, I tune into WIDR.
WIDR is proud to be supported by Pedal Bicycle. Pedal Bicycle has 2 locations on 611 West Michigan Ave and 185 Romans Road. More information can be found at pedalbicycle.com.
Is your RSO looking for new ways to get its name out to Western's campus and the greater Kalamazoo community? Why not use the wider airwaves? For more information on how we can work together to promote your organization and events, go to widrfm.org and click on the Airtime and Sponsorship page under the Support tab.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are back. This is the Hoodrat Strategist radio program, only on 89.1 WIDR FM Kalamazoo. So, did you want to leap on some foreign policy discussion, Lawrence, or did you have something else floating in your brain that you
I'm still
shout out about?
I'm not even gonna lie. I'm still gassed about. I don't want us to just talk about all negative things. There are a few good things that are out right now. Ocean's 8 is a pretty good movie. Hereditary is absolutely scary. E3 had its ups and downs. If you have time on Coffee Talk, we should talk about that.
Oh yeah. No, I'm sorry. Like I've been for those of you who don't know, Lawrence has been doing his own live stream on Facebook. It's every Friday is there a specific time?
Friday at 9.
Every Friday at 9. I'm on it sometimes. I work a lot. We
work, but there are some things that happen at E3 that needs to get thrown down a flight of stairs, and there's some things that that were great. So I wanted to give that news because the next story is going to piss me off. We are bombing 8 countries. That's not a surprise. Our foreign policy when it comes to our militarism is absolutely horrific.
Yeah.
So.
And, I know you're going to discuss this in some detail too, but just to put a fine point on it, we talk a lot about imperialism and just the devastating uptick in civilian casualties that has happened over the last 15, 20 years. And the Trump administration has just flipped the switch, all cylinders. I know you got some hard numbers attached to this too, Lawrence. So.
Yeah. Okay. So the thing that wasn't just being discussed about the immigration policy, immigration problem, is our foreign policy. Our foreign policy when it comes to Central America, when it comes to the drug war, and how we have put in and advocated for and manipulated the governments in Central America and further south is appalling. What we're doing overseas to brown and black people are absolutely horrendous. So, how did this start? Well, it started multiple years, but in modern history, you have the war in Iraq and the war in Afghanistan. President Bush dropped over
70,000 bombs a minute. A day?
It was 70,000. It was 70,000 bombs throughout his presidency.
Oh, right, yeah.
And we were only bombing 2 countries illegally at that time because of the whim of multinational corporations. The next president, where we thought we'd have a more sensible president. Nope. President Obama ratcheted that up to 7 countries, and we dropped over 100,000 bombs throughout his administration in our name to promote democracy and freedom and peace. Also, and also peace.
Yeah. Bombing for peace.
We're bombing for peace. That's like eating pork for veganism or having sex for virginity. It's the most butt backwards thing I've ever heard of.
Yeah.
President Bush was absolutely horrific. President Obama made it worse. So how's President Numbnuts doing? He threw some D's on it, folks.
Yeah.
Throughout his presidency, he's dropped over 135,000 bombs. 100
already?
Yeah. Throughout his presidency, he dropped 135,000 bombs. So what that looks like in numbers, that's 5 bombs an hour. That's 1 bomb every 12 minutes. That is dropped in America's name. That's dropped by that's dropped by us. That we are doing overseas. We're doing signature strikes and surgical strikes on targets that we don't even know, who may be or may be not suspected terrorists. We are hitting Doctors Without Borders.
Oh, I heard about that. Oh,
We're hitting Doctors Without Borders, a group that we are putting money into fund, and we're hitting them. In Obama's presidency, we dropped so many bombs at one point that we literally ran out of bombs. By the end of this year, we will have done the same. And President Trump hasn't even been president for that long. So let me remind people, when we bombed Damascus, we dropped about $221 million on Damascus to prove a point for no darn reason. It only cost $55 million to fix the pipes in Flint. We're dropping more money on these bombs per minute. Within hours, we could have used that same money to fix Flint, to actually put policy in our infrastructure, to actually house that if we're going to bring in immigrants, not put them in private prisons. We could do so much money more with the money that we have, but we're spending it to drop bombs on brown and black people who don't speak English.
Oh, and I bring this point up time and time again, but it's never not worth repeating. Foreign policy is, and our imperialism and endless war, it is an often ignored piece of what is wrong with America. And a lot of people don't understand its relevance to your everyday lives. Well, there it is. Why don't we have free college? Why don't we have universal health care? Why don't we have like a transportation infrastructure with high-speed trains like they do in Japan or that they're building in China? It's because we spend all of our money on war and blowing other people up. And then these same politicians will turn back around on both sides of the aisle, mind you, and say, we don't have enough money for these programs. We need to cut welfare. We need to cut food stamps. We need to increase the how much they put into affordable housing. Like, that's what the Trump administration is doing. And what does the Democratic leadership on the other side say? Oh, we need to impose pay-go and austerity measures and make sure that we're spending money within our means. And it's a way for them to dodge pursuing policies that are popular with the American public but not popular with their donors. And they're able to cloak themselves in this BS rag of fiscal responsibility when, no, you're extremely fiscally irresponsible. Because you know what? You'll tighten your purse when it comes to anything that actually would help the American people. But you know what? The Trump administration, they asked for $80 billion more dollars for the Pentagon. You know what? Give him even more than that. Yeah, just give him a little, give him a tip. There you go.
Like we gave $300 billion to the Pentagon this past year. $300 billion. And we wonder, and it's already came out that the Pentagon and our military has lost over $7 trillion. They lost over $7 trillion of our money. And that's on the low ball side. So, why are we doing these bombings? I want to also bring this up because another story came out a few days ago that the Afghanistan government is doing a deal with, I think, ISIS, because ISIS controls 1/3.
The Taliban.
No, it's Taliban. Yeah, I think it's Taliban. The Taliban controls 1/3 of Afghanistan. Before we went into Afghanistan, the Taliban did not control 1/3 of the country. The Taliban was still a guerrilla army. It was still a very small guerrilla army. Now they control 1/3 of the territory, and they're going to be doing a peace deal with the government to stop the violence. Okay, why isn't anyone on the mainstream national news saying, hey, if they're going to do a peace deal, why are we still fighting?
Well, I have a hypothesis. Would you like to hear it, Lawrence?
I would love to hear it.
So, Funny that you mentioned like that. It's the Taliban actually, and oh man, I forget the title of this book, but I've been meaning to check it out for some time. Jimmy Dore actually was interviewing the guy about it several months ago. But in the book, it's about the Afghanistan war, and some of the things it reveals is that the Taliban has actually tried to surrender to the United States several times, three different times. And keep in mind the Taliban, like they have dealt with other superpowers before, and what happened with America is like they hemmed and hawed, and they would never take the terms on which they were surrendering. So we're now in a situation where Taliban is actually more empowered than they were back in 2001 when we originally invaded, or was it? Yeah, 2001.
2001.
Yeah.
So, but that's the thing that I wanted to get to. We're spending more money on our military now than the height of the Iraq and Afghanistan war. We're spending more money than twice as much than what we are than when we were actually at the height of the Afghanistan war. The thing that no one's asking is why are we spending this money in these wars when technically they're illegal wars, offensive wars with countries that did not attack us.
Yeah, it's like I've said this before, and people think like, "Oh, you're being hyperbolic." It's like, no, we're like a lot of the things the United States does are literal violations of both international law and the standards set at the Nuremberg trial of the Nazis. Like,
and also our Constitution. And also our Constitution. It goes against our constitutional law. So again, the problem that I'm having, and this is the problem that irritates me the most, it's that to say what we just said is criticizing the troops, or to say what we said is disrespecting our country. And I want to be clear. I have family members who are in the armed services. I have friends who are in the armed services. The money that we are giving to military are not going to them. The average person who goes into the armed services only gets paid $18,000 to $20,000 a year.
And there were famous stories too from, you would think with like the fact that the military has this nigh infinite budget that they would have. Everybody would be like super well and properly equipped. There's stories of people in the Afghanistan-Iraq war having to buy their own body armor, having their parents like send it over from home. And of course, when they get home, right now, Trump's administration is working on a scheme to privatize and defund the Veterans Administration. And there have been failed votes to increase funding to the Veterans Administration year after year after year. We send these people over to get in these very dubious wars that are usually based on corporate interests, and then when they get back, our government doesn't even see fit to properly take care of them.
No, I mean, credit to Rachel Maddow when she was actually good. She did an entire segment about how the Afghanistan war and Iraq war was basically planned for Halliburton and GE. They to make money. When she now she's a hack, but back in 2008, 2009, she was absolutely right on those stories. The other thing that makes it irritating about the story is that that's not getting any coverage at all. When you want to talk about the corruption of our administration, it is bipartisan. But at the same time, why are we bombing 8 countries? Why is it that we're spending more money than we are at the height of the Iraq war? Where's this money going? Who are we actually attacking? None of these questions are being asked, and when they are being asked, they're saying, "Well, you're not respecting the troops," or it's manipulated by a general that they've paid to be for more war.
Let me ask this: Is it not supporting the troops to ask why so many people in Trump's cabinet who are part of the military-industrial complex have stock in companies like Raytheon and Northrop
Honeywell.
Grumman, Honeywell. You know, let's talk about, like, you know, some people will get like exasperated. It's like, it can't really be all about money. I mean, we go to these wars for like geopolitical purposes, strategic purposes, right? And it's like, usually that is just a cover in order to deal with some economic need that the American government and the corporations that own it have to deal with. I mean, look at what's going on in Syria. You know, we've been there for years, and you know, we talk a lot about there is an oil pipeline, two competing pipelines, one Russia wants through there, one that the United States wants, and you notice how it was very concurrent with the news about these pipelines. It was getting into the news. All of a sudden, America's got to go save the people of Syria from the evil Assad. A more recent example, Iran. Iran decided that they were going to switch to the euro and no longer use the petrodollar. And literally less than a week after that, that is when the Trump administration decided to withdraw from the Iran nuclear deal and start posturing a possible invasion of the country. Less than a few days away. But of course, most Americans, the vast majority of Americans, have no idea about the first part of that story because, you know, the mainstream media doesn't talk about it. They do not talk about it. They don't make these kind of connections. And, you know, this isn't conspiratorial thinking or anything. This is proven. This is how our government operates. I mean, you know, it's how the CIA and the military-industrial complex have functioned for years, almost as handmaidens to these economic hitmen that will go around the world facilitating these deals. And if basically they can't get the resources out of a country or build what they want there, the last resort is military intervention from the United States. And we have seen that again and again and again. And, you know, one of the things that, you know, it's hard for me to understand the dissipation of the anti-war movement. And one of the things I heard that was really depressing to me, and maybe it kind of plays a little bit more into how we've been talking about empathy throughout the hour. Somebody correlated, they were talking about how, if you notice, the anti-war movement died down when we stopped having caskets coming home from Iraq and Afghanistan, when more of our warfare shifted to drones. And I guess I'd just say, like, that's one of the main dangers of nationalism, because it makes both conservatives and most liberals, let's be clear, ignore the plight of people on the other side of the world, not have the same empathy for them as they would have for someone down the street or somebody even across the country in a similar situation. And it allows these companies like Northrop Grumman and Raytheon to make excessive profits. Oof.
I mean, I couldn't say it better myself, man. Mm-hmm. So let's go on another topic. You want to take a break and then get on another topic?
Yeah, that sounds like a good idea. It's about 6:25. All right, ladies and gentlemen, you are listening to the Hoodrat Strategist radio program, only on 89.1 WIDR Kalamazoo, your only source for political revolution.
Is lack of summer green bringing you down? Finch Greenhouse, located in Wood Hall on WMU's campus, might be the perfect thing for you. With hours Monday through Thursday from 9:30 to 3:30 p.m. and on Friday until 1:30, this space will bring you to a time before urbanization. Located inside Wood Hall, the space is open to the public with an extensive and varied plant collection with a wide range of diversity from orchids to succulents and many more. A friendly reminder from Wider to enjoy life.
slot in the wider clock and could be filled with an underwriting announcement for your local Kalamazoo business. For more information, please visit widerfm.org and head to the contact page.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. We are back, and hey, Noran's just joining us, and Lawrence is skedaddled. He's got some ruckus to raise of revolutionary nature, I'm sure. Sorry
I'm
about
the new
it.
Lawrence now.
Yeah, the new Lawrence, everyone. Yeah. Oh man, so we got about half an hour. I was thinking about jumping on that story about Kalamazoo on the 50 worst cities list. I don't know if there's anything else that you really wanted to jump on first, Nora.
There's some flooding going on in the UP that not a whole lot of developments on it, but there's a big time flooding, mostly fueled by climate change. It's wrecked our already crumbling infrastructure, and the government's response is about as ineffective as you could expect.
Well, maybe if you just teach the flood with some conservative history books. That talking about that a little bit earlier too. Oh man, I do want to dig into that. Yeah, but I'm gonna read a little bit from. So this was a big story. It happened right, I think last Thursday. It was right after the cutoff of when we're talking about topics to talk about it on the show. But a lot of us have been talking about it. We got on the 50 worst cities list.
Woo! We did it!
Yeah, and this was in the USA Today and 24/7 Wall Street, I think it was the original publisher, but this has been aggregated to a lot of different sites. And I'll just read what it says. We're on number 37, so I mean that's not too, Detroit's number 1, so that's another thing they said. Michigan has 3 cities on this list.
Any other states that happen to be record breakers here?
Any other state? Well, not that I can see off top of my head, but I know what was the third? Oh, the third city was Flint. I can't remember which number it ranks at, but yeah, it's so here it is by the numbers. Poverty rate 30.9%. Percentage with at least a bachelor's degree 31.3. Goes on to say some other reasons why it's on this list. Air quality in Kalamazoo is nearly the worst of any U.S. city.
Wow.
Yep. The city's air is considered hazardous for about 15% of days in a given year, far larger share than the 6% average nationwide. The city is also among the most dangerous nationwide. There were 1,217 violent crimes in 2016 for every 100,000 residents, more than triple the U.S. violent crime rate of 386. And as they said, 30.9 is the poverty rate, and the U.S. average is 14%. So it's a little bit more than double. Now, what was interesting to me was kind of the responses that I saw in local media to this. Well, it's funny. I was watching Channel 3 News, and the anchor seemed really distraught. They were like, Kalamazoo ended up on a 50 worst cities list. It's like, oh no. Oh, now, not to, harp on like Channel 3 or any of the other local news too much, but where did they go? Where did they go to talk to people about this? Can you take a guess?
Nowhere.
They went to like the downtown walking mall, of course.
Oh boy.
Because all of the people who come in and visit and go to our bars are going to have an informed decision about what it's like, or an informed opinion about what it's like to live in Kalamazoo.
See, the first place I go for informed opinion about local visitors, opinion of people who actually live here, is random visitors who get drunk at our bars.
Yeah. And, okay, here's a golden quote here. I'm not going to tell you who it is, and then I will, and then it'll probably make a lot of sense after I say it. What bothers me about them is there's a 16-year-old kid out there trying to figure out where they're going to go for college, and they're going to look at lists online, and they're going to find that, and they're going to go, oh, I won't be safe here, or the air is full of smog, or these silly things. And then he says, as far as I know, it's some fake news guy in his parents' basement talking about a guy who wrote a study that was published in USA Today. By the way, I don't really know how that qualifies fake news.
Well, I mean, it's still under the umbrella of mainstream media, so like...
Yeah, it is. But that is Ron Kitchens, who runs Southwest Michigan First.
Oh, wouldn't you know?
Yeah.
What a great person to talk to about getting the opinion of the common man.
Mm-hmm.
For those of you that don't know, Southwest Michigan First is this bunch of businesses, so-called economic group, but usually just a bunch of big businesses that operate in the area that like lobby and do all this other shady stuff sometimes.
And what is like deftly ironic about this to me, and we talked a little bit about this on the show. Southwest Michigan First played a huge role in shooting down the progressive income tax that was on the table a couple years ago. We got the Foundation for Excellence instead, which we talk about on the show a lot. Long story short, instead of a progressive tax that would tax the rich and we'd get our city revenue from that, the rich people decided to give us a bunch of money while lowering property taxes, so they basically make their own money back, and they get to basically have financial leverage over what happens in the city and how it is run. And it's just and like another person they interview they're not connected to any of these big groups, but like something they say is like they probably haven't been there. They haven't been to the breweries. They haven't walked around town. Oh boy, says someone who I'm guessing has probably never been to the Edison or the North Side. I mean, God, or even the Vine neighborhood. Like it's very tin-eared to just like, all of these people who are so shocked that Kalamazoo made this list. Now, I want to be very clear. I was born and raised in Kalamazoo. I love this city. I'm not happy that we're on this list, but it's not a shocker to me. And the fact that, you have someone like Ron Kitchens coming out and talking about how shocked they are by this, I mean... Where have you been, Ron? Well, I know where you've been. You live somewhere out of town. You're not connected to the parts of the city. And, he did go on to say, like, oh, well, the poverty rate is something that we need to work on. But that is something the city government and all, like, the big philanthropist networks in Kalamazoo have been telling they're gonna fix for years. First, it's like the Kalamazoo Promise is going to solve the poverty problem. Or these programs we're doing through Imagine Kalamazoo are going to solve the problem. And... what I think it boils down to for me is like Kalamazoo is so dependent on this kind of philanthropic model where the rich will come down and they'll sprinkle their money and see where it lands. And it's like when the only tool you have is a hammer, every problem looks like a nail. And time again, we see these solutions, these top-down solutions imposed on the city that do not actually ask the people of neighborhoods like the Edison and the North Side what they want and what they need. And that's why you have such an abysmal poverty rate. Not to mention the fact that so many of the people who work in Kalamazoo live outside the actual city limits. And, their solution to that, again, it's not to build affordable housing. It's we're going to tear down these parking lots in the city. And this is a somewhat different story, but It's something I saw that it really reminded me of kind of what the city's trajectory is. The Brownfield Development Corporation, they bought up the property, and there are going to be apartments there, but like the cheapest thing they're offering is like 2-bedroom apartments for like $900. And it's like that. Every meeting I've gone to about what to do with property downtown is we need affordable housing downtown. We need affordable housing downtown. And it's like all of these philanthropists in the city and the city government heard that and was like, oh, okay, we will build property and there will be people who can afford it. It's like that's not what we meant. You know. And you know, crime rate of course goes hand in hand in that. You know, especially as somebody who grew up in the Edison neighborhood, like, you know, these are crimes of desperation that happen. They'll, you know, when they mug somebody or they engage in, you know, underground like drug activity, it's always because there's an economic impetus. It's because there's not enough jobs to go around. It's because they don't have access to economic opportunity. It's because when they do bring economic investment to neighborhoods like the Edison, it's bringing outside businesses in rather than trying to build up people in the community to start their own businesses, be you know, entrepreneurs and such, maybe even some worker co-ops. You know, I'm thinking particularly of Edison. They took that block and now there's like a sandwich shop and there's a Pho on the block, which most of the residents in the Edison wouldn't be able to really afford to go to on a regular basis at all. And I mean, it paints it. Sorry, like that particular block of the Edison, it just encapsulates, I think, the whole problem with the situation here. Because you have Pho on the block, and it's right down the block from the Sugar Bowl, which is a working class kind of dive bar that's been there for years. And I'm guessing like it's like a ticking clock. I wonder when they're gonna like try to buy that place up and turn it into like you know, a microbrewery or something, and you know. Sorry, I've been going off on a rant for a long time, Nora, and it's something I'm kind of passionate about. But please interject if there's any like kind of stray thoughts you have on this topic too.
Yeah, like Kalamazoo, I don't feel like as unsafe here as I might in other cities, but I guess that's like part of due to our so-called reputation as a progressive city, which, you know, given what you've just heard on these radio waves, you should be questioning that quite a bit. Like, you know, someone like me being trans, I don't have to worry about hate crimes as much in Kalamazoo, but there's still like a considerable amount of other violent crime here. And the whole air pollution thing, like, I'll believe it. Like, even if it's not apparent in downtown or on the west side of town or even on the south side, like if you go up Gull Road on the northwest, it just stinks like all the time. Yeah. It just stinks. Mm-hmm. And that's something that people have just gotten complicit with. And I guess as like, you know, making number one like in air pollution just baffles me, because I would have thought it would have been the area around like Detroit or some other like, you know, or in some parts of LA County. What cities ended up being worse than us? Like, I mean, we're not great, but we're not 37th worst. I don't think.
Yeah. Well, let's see here. Where'd it go? Knoxville, Tennessee is right there. Toledo, Ohio is at 35.
We beat Toledo. We did it.
We did. Yeah, we beat. Yeah, take that, Ohio. And there's a lot of ones from Ohio actually. Canton's at 33. And some other notable ones. Dayton is on there too at 29. So a lot of them from Ohio. You know, I think it's just kind of.
I'm seeing some from California too.
Yeah.
Would not be surprised there's a lot of Florida on this list.
Yep, Miami Beach is on there. You know, I think it just goes to show, like, seeing a lot of these Midwestern cities kind of on the same place. Like, you got to understand, like, that's we are Gary, Indiana, which really is at 18, which really isn't a surprise to anybody, I don't think. Youngstown, again, Ohio's got a lot on this list.
Wow. Noticing a lot from Illinois?
I didn't find. I think there was something on the back end in the 40s or 50s, but a lot of these going down. Cleveland's at number 5. St.
My little
Louis
brother's there
is-
for an
yeah.
internship, but he'll be all right because he's
Okay.
making $20 an hour.
But Michigan, Flint's at 2 and Detroit's at 1.
Wow, I would have expected it to, for Flint to be number 1 maybe, but there's, it's certainly not the only city that's been poisoned by this stuff. I don't know how much they're taking that into account because, East Chicago, Indiana would probably be way up there too.
Yeah. You notice ever since the Flint crisis, a lot of these other kind of water poisoning scandals, they don't get the same kind of national attention. There's actually there's this journalism group called Project Censored, and they put out a yearly list of the most censored stories. And last year, one of their top ones was, there are I can't remember the exact number, but it's a staggering percentage of American cities with water that's even more unsafe than Flint.
It's over 100 at least.
Yeah, over 100 American cities. Yeah, as I think you remember seeing the same article. And again, it's almost like, they saw what happened with Flint, and they didn't really want the genie to get out of the bottle again, because even though the mainstream media doesn't talk about it, everybody else still does. Like, you still hear people say, like, Flint still doesn't have clean water. I think that's the last thing Michelle Wolf said after she told all those jokes at the president or the correspondence dinner. It's like people get genuinely outraged about this stuff, and the only way you can kind of bottle that up is to not talk about it and really like pretend that it's not going on.
Oh, damn.
And I think that's part of what Kalamazoo is guilty of. The city has a lot of problems. They get ignored. Band-aids get put on them, and then what happens? Well, we end up on a list. And it's funny to think about the whole thing with air pollution, because if you're downtown in the campus area, West Niche Hill, some of the nicer parts of town, this is probably not something you're very familiar with. But you go to the Edison, you go to the north side, there are a lot of old industrial sites that have never been properly cleaned up. We've got the Allied paper mill site that still has a lot of noxious contaminants and chemicals that are buried under significant amounts of dirt, and they built a health clinic over it. I find that really problematic. I mean, they say it's safe, but it's still like you said, there are noxious fumes in the area. There's also that site over off of I believe it's Cork Street, and that's another kind of abandoned factory site that we have friends who've lived in that area, and they talk about getting headaches. They talk about getting sick sometimes from the air. This is a real problem in Kalamazoo. A lot of people don't really see it because, again, we're that ostensibly protective city that cares about its environment and takes global warming seriously and all this
I wanted to give a quick correction earlier. It's way over 100. As of last year, around mid-November, Reuters has identified 3,810 neighborhood areas out of 24 states in D.C. that have double or more the lead poisoning that Flint does. And this is specifically lead poisoning. It doesn't as far as I'm aware, any other type of poisoning.
Yeah, it doesn't even talk about other contaminants.
3,810 local areas with zip codes that have average populations of 7,500. So this is millions of Americans having to drink lead-tainted water that's coming through their pipes, having to shower in it, having to bathe in it, having to wash their dishes. We can't live like this. We can't.
No, man, literally, it'll drive us all crazy and dumb. And that is speaking in a literal sense.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah.
Well, I think a big thing that happened was people figured out about Flint and nothing happened out of it. This is before the last midterms, mind you, and I guess it was still settling in, but Snyder and the rest, they didn't pay a political price for it, and they probably still won't, because now they can legally purge whoever they want from the voter rolls.
Yeah,
they're gonna get away with it, and now the corporate state finds out that they can have poisoned water, just put it in these poor and minority neighborhoods and just get away with it, and nothing's gonna happen. So we live in an oligarchy where immigrants are being put in concentration camps for committing a genocide in Yemen right now. If you don't think that it can happen here, it's already happening here, is what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. So that's that cheerful topic about our lovely city. And you know what? We might be number 37 but in my hearts, we're number one. Just the people I know here. 'Cause, we're very resilient people. We roll with the punches, and a lot of fantastic art. I think art comes out of strife, and we got a lot of that in the city. That's for sure.
I think it has to do with our student and hipster culture around here too.
Yeah,
for sure.
Mm-hmm. I'd also, actually, that's another thing that's really overlooked. Such a focus on downtown. There's some vibrant art scenes that are really starting to spill out of the neighborhoods. Like Edison has, they've got the Fire Collective that's been around for a number of years. There's also, I'm gonna give a quick plug to Rooted, and they are a coffee shop not a coffee shop. They're a performance space over on Fulford Street, and they've been doing a lot of really cool arts and poetry stuff over on the south side. By the way, they're doing a poetry reading tomorrow at 8 o'clock for the Good Open Mic, hosted by Great Dane, who actually read at a fundraiser of ours for Boiling Point, and it was dope as hell. So, yeah, if you got nothing to do tomorrow night, check it out. Rooted, 1501 Fulford Street. Support some of your local arts down in a marginalized community there. Yeah. So, Nora, let's try to jump to a new topic. Was there something that you wanted to hit on that maybe we haven't really addressed yet? I know we had a lot of articles and such that we thought about hitting on earlier.
Well, some interesting developments that happened recently in terms of marijuana legalization. Our neighbors in Canada became the second country in the world nationwide to legalize recreational marijuana.
Oh, what's going on, eh?
It's already signed into law. It's just a matter of when it gets implemented. It's unsure of because they have a similar problem with the drug war and disproportionately locking up poor and people of color people for use of marijuana. It's uncertain what will happen with them, but both houses easily passed it, and now it's going to be enacted soon. Kind of wish it was a little bit earlier because I'm going there just this weekend, but hey, what are you going to do? And it kind of draws into interesting context because another article that I showed you in New York City, that there's still going to be unequal enforcement of marijuana laws that are about to be enacted in New York statewide. And this is which is perhaps I'm going to guess it's a ploy by Cuomo to appear more progressive so he doesn't try to get so horribly stomped by Cynthia Nixon. But a lot of various DAs in counties across New York City, because it's split into several different counties because you can't fit that much of NYC into one county within reason. So they're all going to be enforcing it with somewhat different rules. And what their overall policy seems to be is they're going to criminalize people who already have criminal records for using marijuana, if they don't have IDs, if they've got a record, and who that's going to affect the most. So it comes off as a sort of separate but equal, quote unquote, response to marijuana usage within New York City. And that matters because there's still a huge problem with policing and incarceration there, as there is in any other country, other city around the country.
Yeah, that's true. I'm sorry, I have a brain fart there, but it reminds me of, I think Sean King wrote an article for The Intercept about that quite a while ago about even more kind of discussing how legalization is not in the way that it's being rolled out in many places. It's not doing anything to protect or alleviate the policing of marginalized, predominantly Black and Latinx communities. Hey, that's something I'm worried about on the show too. In addition to Canada, Michigan is looking to. We will be having legalization on our ballot this year.
Yes.
And, a lot of people I know are ecstatic. They think it's good news. It's good news for marijuana activists. It's good news for other leftists who are running in the election because, marijuana tends to bring out a lot of people, non-traditional voters who tend to lean towards the left or progressive. Something we should remember going forward, though, is that, always be a little bit suspicious when marijuana has bipartisan support, and it largely does in Michigan. Like, the Republicans actually wanted to make it legal before the election, more or less to make sure the Democrats couldn't benefit from it. But
also so they could add amendments to make it more corporate friendly.
To make it more corporate friendly, that's right. But even as it stands now, there are still laws and stipulations with starting marijuana-based businesses in Michigan that are extremely restrictive to working-class people. We talked before on the show about how there were people on the north side who they wanted to get involved in this, and the licensing fees for starting a dispensary are $500,000.
Wow.
They're way out of the reach of anybody who's been part of the underground marijuana industry for years. Doesn't have that kind of collateral laying around.
Unless you run a cartel.
Or a major corporation. There was talks of a dispensary being opened up on the north side, basically being run by foreign investors, I think from the UAE possibly. But yeah, how gross is that? You're going to build a bunch of millionaires are going to build a business in a neighborhood that has literally been targeted by police for decades for marijuana, and they're going to be like, this underground business you were in for years to feed your family, well, now it's going to be subject to our oversight. We're going to hire you in. I just imagine this, somebody who maybe had a little bit of autonomy and dignity growing marijuana plants in their basement, selling them around the neighborhood to folks who needed it. And now you're going to have a boss, and you're probably going to be paid $10.50 an hour to do something that you were making a decent living at doing before. So
and it's funded by random people on the other side of the world.
Yeah, exactly. Not the neighborhood. Not there are people in the Edison and in the north side who I know would thrive doing local marijuana businesses, but I don't see any way for them to actually do it independently without having to become somehow subservient to a corporation, at least where the laws stand right now.
Yeah, and that's going to be that's a brain fart. I forgot where I was going with this. Is there anything else we want to talk about within the time we have?
I don't know. We got about 5 minutes. We've thoroughly covered most of what we really wanted to talk about. Let's do a quick reminder, though. This is an older story, but this ties into what we're talking about with ICE. And also wanted to plug something while we're at it. Just so you understand, we talked about how ICE is right here. They're right over in Calhoun County. This is an article from May 4th, but they're talking about this is what's going on over there. Calhoun County, which currently houses as many as 240 ICE detainees at its jail in Battle Creek, could house 300 more if ICE gives the county the go-ahead to build a new facility. Calhoun County officials submitted the proposal to ICE in October 2017, offering to house ICE detainees for the Detroit and Chicago field offices, according to documents MLive obtained by the Freedom of Information Act. It also, I'll go on to say, Sheriff Matthew Sexton told MLive in April he believes the odds are against ICE telling Calhoun County to build a jail, which would bring in additional revenue beyond the millions Calhoun County rakes in now because of its current boarding contract with ICE. I just want to reread that last sentence to emphasize it, which would bring in additional revenue beyond the millions Calhoun County rakes in now because of its current boarding contract with ICE. People of Battle Creek, people of Calhoun County, your local government is complicit in the new fascism, and they're doing it for money. Just to make it plainly clear. And I want to thank, there were activists out there via Justice for Our Neighbors who were out there at the correctional facility speaking truth to power earlier. I wasn't able to make it myself. I work nights. I couldn't do it. 2 hours of sleep. That's no good. But there is going to be another protest to coincide with national protests on June 30th. And I'm pulling up the event information for it right now. It's being organized by the First Congregational Church, Surge of Southwest Michigan, a couple other local organizations over in Battle Creek. And it's going to be June 30th from 11 a.m. to 12 p.m., and that's going to be in line with several other nationwide actions where people will be going to ICE facilities and correctional facilities that hold ICE detainees and basically be speaking up and being like, no, dude, stop this. So I'm hoping like next week maybe we get some of the organizers on. I know our own organizing groups, we're trying to be on top of this too. So yeah, that'll be that is going to be June 30th at 11 a.m. 161 East Michigan Avenue over in Battle Creek. So yeah, if you're mad about this, check it out. I know there's also going to be a rally in Kalamazoo. I'm sure there'll be some important speakers, and I think that starts at what, like 2 o'clock, Nora? Something like that.
Set on, wait, when is this again?
June 30th.
I mean, I wouldn't know. I got to be out of town for the 30th, unfortunately.
Yeah. But hypothetically, you could go to both of them. I would honestly say showing up to an actual ICE facility is probably more important. No offense. I'm sure there's going to be some great speakers at the rally in Kalamazoo at Bronson Park. But, you know, without going too deep into a rabbit hole, we're in a time that requires action. And, you know, rallies are important, but if it's not followed up by action, then you're basically just kind of going there to be in what's the word?
A parade?
A parade. Or just like a commiseration circle with a bunch of other liberal folk. But
Happy World Refugee Day.
Yeah, happy World Refugee Day indeed. Yeah, I almost forgot about that. All right. Okay, I think with that, we can probably close out the show. I want to thank y'all for listening. This has been the Hoodrat Strategist radio program, only on 89.1 FM, WIDR Kalamazoo. Your only source for political revolution, and I want y'all, especially in these trying times, especially they're locking kids up in cages and they're dropping a bomb every 12 minutes. Keep fighting for that revolution solution, ladies and gentlemen, because we need that more than ever. Peace.